Charles Fraser. The Secret of Jack-o'-lantern. The Sherlock Holmes Halloween Special. Episode 5. Based on the characters by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. A Go Audio production. Back then, 35 years later, it was the night before Samhain. Jack was leaning against the bar in a pub. He had spent his last penny. He thought about his father, about when he was still a little boy and his father had explained to him that it didn't matter how one earned money as long as one was clever about it. Oh yes, he had always been a clever little chap, but that hadn't really got him anywhere so far. It was high time to return to his true calling and hang up his life as a blacksmith on the proverbial nail. He rummaged in his pocket and searched it again for a coin. But they were just as empty as when he had last searched them 10 minutes ago. "Hey Jack, how are you?" asked the man suddenly, who had appeared out of nowhere and was dressed entirely in black. He smiled at him mischievously. Jack was not in the mood for conversation. "What's it to you?" he snapped at the stranger. But the stranger was still smiling, and suddenly his eyes began to glow red like fire. Jack stepped back and observed him carefully. What a brilliant trick that was. He wanted to be able to do that too. "Hey mate, how do you do that with your eyes? It's enough to give one the shivers," marvelled Jack. The man in black blinked twice, and the red in his eyes vanished as quickly as it had appeared. "You should be afraid, Jack. You should truly be frightened of me. I am your lord and master, the king of the underworld. I am the devil himself, and I am here to collect you." Jack burst out laughing and held his stomach. "God's greetings to you," he mocked. The man's hand shot forward and gripped his throat. Sharp nails dug into his skin, and Jack gasped for air. Suddenly the man's eyes glowed red again, and Jack could see the flames flickering within them. Placatingly, Jack raised both hands in the air and tried to swallow. The devil loosened his grip and smiled at him once again. "Jack, I must confess, I have been watching you for a long time and I admire you. You lead the life that I envision, and that is why I want to invite you to join me." "That is very kind," replied Jack. "However, I am not a very sociable person. Rather, I am a loner, a hermit. Therefore, I would like to politely decline the invitation." The smile on the man's face died, and he hissed. "That was not a request, but an insurmountable fact. You are coming with me." But Stingy Jack remembered his father again and what he had taught him. So he said, "I will gladly go with you. However, I have one very last request. I will happily give you my soul if you first buy me a drink." The devil thought briefly and had to laugh. "That can be arranged." The devil also rummaged through his pockets, but had to realise that he was not carrying any coins. So he quickly transformed himself into a coin to pay for the drink. However, Jack snatched the coin and hastily put it into his wallet. In his wallet, Jack always carried his father's silver cross. Thus, the devil could not transform back and remain trapped in Jack's wallet. "Well, what do you say now? Will you withdraw your invitation?" asked Jack. The devil's voice rang out. "You damned bastard! Release me at once! How dare you imprison the devil?" "Because I can," Jack taunted. "I shall grant you and your corrupted soul another 5 years on earth before I come to collect you. What say you?" the devil proposed. "Make it 10 years and we have an agreement." "Agreed," replied Jack, opened his wallet and let the devil go. Today, the 2nd of November, 1933. Holmes and I had spent the rest of the night together in the living room. We sat in our armchairs whilst Holmes explained to me the connections between the turnip, the pumpkins, and Jack, which according to legend occurred on a gloomy night during Samhain. To be honest, the story sounded like utter nonsense to me, but for Holmes, it seemed to make perfect sense. Now we just need to find out why number 5 on today's list is marked with a question mark. Who is meant to be the 5th corpse? Holmes pondered. The devil's macabre games, I mused. A thought occurs to me. Looking at the matter logically, the question mark can only refer to someone we either know or should not know, namely, the murderer himself. The murderer himself? But if the murderer is suddenly meant to play the victim today, how is the deed supposed to take place? I pondered. The thought cannot be entirely dismissed. However, I fear that this is where you come into play. Our main actors are a demonic devil. Though perhaps this is Jack himself, I'm not quite certain about that yet. Then there's our murderer, and finally you. According to my deduction, one of you 3, or rather 4, should become the 5th corpse today. And to be honest, my money's on you, Holmes stated. And you just tell me that so cold-bloodedly to my face? I said indignantly. Looking at it soberly, yes, he replied. I was lost for words. The devil was planning my death for today, and all Holmes could do was look at the matter soberly. I suggest we find out as quickly as possible who our perpetrator is. Only then do we have a small chance of averting the inevitable, he said dryly. Whatever might save me from eternal existence in hell, I'm in. Back then, 45 years later, 10 years after his first encounter with the devil, Jack was once again sitting in the pub on All Hallows Eve, drinking his drinks. It had grown rather late, and he was one of the last 3 patrons. There had been no sign of the devil thus far, so he cheerfully decided to head home. Or should he perhaps visit one of the brothels instead? The little redhead had caught his fancy. Although during his last rendezvous, the thought had occurred to him that, because of the hair, it might even have been the devil himself providing him with pleasure. He rather liked that thought. Thus, he also liked the girl. He smiled in anticipation. Yes, he would visit the brothel first. However, when he finally knocked on the door, requested entry and asked for Melissa, the house's madam told him, "Melissa isn't here today. The silly thing has vanished without a trace. Come back tomorrow." With that, the woman, reeking of alcohol and sweat, slammed the door in his face. Disappointed, Jack wandered off and actually wondered whether his suspicion regarding Melissa had been correct after all. "Hello, Jack," a seductive voice sounded behind him. There he was again, and not a single day too late. "Hello, Satan," Jack greeted back. He had pondered for a long time about another encounter and thought about how he could outwit the devil again. Nevertheless, now that it was actually happening, he was very nervous indeed. "Ready to descend into hell with me?" the devil asked casually. "Ready if you are," Jack grinned. The devil pondered briefly, then said, "Stingy Jack, or Drunk Jack, or whatever pet names the people from your village have for you. You have truly lived your last 10 years. I am proud of you." The devil flattered him. "I am very pleased," Jack replied. "And since we understand each other so well, I have one very last request of you." The devil pondered. He remembered all too well what had happened 10 years ago when Jack had asked him for a favour. "I cannot promise you that yet," he answered. "First tell me what it is about." "But of course, old friend, I wish for one last meal from you, and it shall be an apple. Here, from this tree, right here." The devil examined the tree very carefully, and when he could not detect any danger to himself, he agreed. So the devil nimbly climbed up the tree to pick the apple for Jack. Jack, however, swiftly drew his knife, the good one he had also inherited from his father, the one with the beautiful ornaments on the handle, and carved a cross into the bark of the tree. How often he had practiced this procedure over the past 10 years. And indeed, it had worked. The devil sat high up in the tree and could no longer climb down. "I've caught you again," Jack triumphed and mocked the devil. "Grant me another 10 years on earth and I shall let you down again," Jack proposed. "No," said the devil with forked tongue. "You let me down and I shall leave your soul in peace for all eternity." That is even better, Jack thought to himself, and subsequently removed the cross. However, at that moment, he was not yet aware of what the devil's promise might truly mean. Today, the 2nd of November, 1933, Holmes and I had paid a visit to Scotland Yard. We asked Inspector Wolfford if we could examine all the investigation files. With a smug expression, he handed them to us and said, "Perhaps it wasn't so unwise after all to document all the connections, friends, relatives, and acquaintances." "That was certainly not unwise, Inspector, and after all, it is part of your work. However, neither have you prevented another murder with it so far, nor are you able to deduce any connections from it. Would you be so kind now?" Holmes asked politely. Annoyed, Wolfford handed him the requested files. We withdrew to a quiet corner with them and went through the various contacts, dates, and names. "Inspector Wolfford's men have done a thorough job," Holmes noted appreciatively. "Perhaps you should tell him exactly that. Your relationship has seemed rather strained as of late," I said in response. Holmes briefly looked up from the files and let out a consenting grunt. "Do you remember the first body, the midwife Anne Hughes?" asked Holmes. I nodded. "Of course, Holmes." Mrs. Hughes had 2 daughters, the elder one, Olivia Morgan, who had also found her, and a second one, Elsie Field, who lived somewhat outside the city. The surname was previously unknown to us. "Quite right, Holmes," I agreed. "Don't you think that over the years Oldfield might have transformed into Field?" Holmes pondered. "Thus, he would be the son-in-law of the deceased, and perhaps a very distant descendant of the true Jack Oldfield. And do you remember what the elder sister, Olivia Morgan, told us about Elsie? She had experienced such problems during her pregnancy years ago. This means for us that the son-in-law could have known the teacher as a parent of a pupil, just as he could have known Father Bancroft and Nurse Nancy Rogers." Now I could see that gleam in Holmes's eyes that I had missed over the past 5 days. He had finally found his trail. He was very close, and he could feel it. "Inspector Wolfford!" he shouted. The inspector came to us moments later, and Holmes immediately posed his question. "Do you happen to know the name of the husband of Mrs. Hughes's younger daughter, our first victim?" Wolfford pondered. "Is that not noted?" he asked irritably. "No, unfortunately not, although I must praise your otherwise complete documentation to the highest degree. Really excellent work, Inspector." Inspector Wolfford's expression visibly softened. The murders of the past few days had taken their toll on him as well, and an outspoken recognition from Holmes soothed his battered ego and noticeably gave him renewed strength. "Summersby, would you please come here for a moment?" Inspector Wolfford called to one of his subordinates. A thin, small man hurried over at once. "What can I do for you, sir?" "Summersby, you have an excellent memory and recorded the interviews with Mrs. Hughes's 2 daughters. Do you happen to recall the full name of the younger daughter Elsie's husband?" "Of course, sir. The man's name was Field, Jack Field." A triumphant smile appeared on Holmes's face. Even the devil himself could not have chosen a more suitable murder suspect. Back then, 75 years later, Jack Oldfield's time had run out. He had lived his life. He had drunk and whored and pulled off the odd dodgy deal. When he noticed that morning, right after waking up, that he was no longer able to get up, he reached for the bottles of spirits he had hoarded on his bedside table and had literally drunk himself to death. His heart had finally ceased operating and stopped beating in the afternoon. Now the time had come. Shortly thereafter, Jack stood before the gates of heaven and asked for entry, but a man named Peter merely laughed mockingly and said, "Jack Oldfield, you cannot be serious. Do you really think you can make yourself comfortable up here with us and compete with the angels in drinking? You are most certainly in the wrong place. If I were you, I would try presenting myself 2 floors below." And the man named Peter slammed the gates of heaven in his face. Very well, thought Jack. Who wants to be in this boring heaven anyway, when one can have it nice and warm and exciting in hell? So he finally made his way to hell. At Hell's Gate, his old acquaintance, the devil, was already waiting for him. "God's greetings," the devil sneered, just as Jack himself had once done. "But no, you can't say that. Nobody up there wants you." "I like you, devil," said Jack. "We two will surely get along well." And Jack made to step through the gate, but the devil stood in his way. "No, my friend," he said. "There is no entry for you here. Or have you already forgotten what I promised you back then? I will leave your soul in peace for all eternity. And believe me, Jack, eternity is a bloody long time." "Is there nothing I can do to make you take back your promise?" asked Jack hopefully. "Let me think for a moment. I'll be generous. Bring me the souls of the 5 people who ever meant something to you or were kind to you in life. There would be the soul of the midwife who brought you into the world, Anne, your teacher, Joseph, the good-natured, albeit slightly dim-witted priest Blake, the nurse Nancy, who had cared for your father so heartbreakingly, and lastly, the soul of Jack Oldfield. He was always the most important to you." Jack seemed confused. "How am I supposed to do that? Everyone except me is in heaven, and I am damned and cannot sacrifice myself to you." The devil laughs loudly. "Then you must return to where you came from." But it was dark and windy, and the path was long. So finally, the devil took pity on Jack Oldfield. He gave Jack a glowing coal straight from the fires of hell. Jack placed the coal in a hollowed-out turnip that he had brought as provisions for the journey and went away. Since then, his damned soul has wandered through the darkness with the lantern. Today, the 2nd of November, 1933, Holmes and I were on our way to Jack Field's residential address. As we had further learned from Mr. Summersby, his wife, Elsie Field, had been visiting her sister, Olivia Morgan, since learning of her mother's death. We hoped to find Jack Field alone at home. The journey was extremely quiet. Each of us was lost in our own thoughts. Holmes was likely pondering the connections and links between the devil and his intentions. I, on the other hand, was preoccupied with the notion that today might be my last day on earth. "Holmes, you know that I wish to be buried next to my Mary?" I asked my friend, thus tearing him from his mental fabrications. "I would also like white lilies on my grave. Moreover, might I ask you, as my long-standing companion and best friend, to deliver the eulogy and obituary for me?" "But of course," Holmes promised me. Yet I was disappointed and made no effort to hide it. "No, but Watson, you won't die today," or "Don't worry, Watson, nothing will happen to you." "My dear friend," Holmes began, "I cannot promise you anything that I am not 100% certain I can keep." "Well then, today, 5 days ago, Jack wandered through the centuries in the gloomy emptiness and darkness of the in-between world. But now, as every year, the time had finally come. Samhain was at the doorstep, and the gates to and from the in-between world stood wide open. Over all these years, during those 5 days, he had done his homework. The souls of his 5 significant people had long since returned to Earth and were, as centuries ago, busy with their life's tasks. Now he needed a plan. He would simply disguise himself as the devil and persuade the person, the poor fool who had taken his place in life, to kill them all. Jack Field, as fate would have it, worked as a pumpkin seller, and rather unsuccessfully at that, as Jack noted with patronising satisfaction. So he appeared to him on the first day when the barriers of the worlds merged, on the 29th of October, and seduced him. He knew how to lure the innocent Jack Field. After all, he was but a shadow of his former self. He promised him eternal life and alcohol, as much as he could carry. And that wasn't even a lie, for he wouldn't receive more than he could carry in the gloomy emptiness of the in-between world. He instructed his new self and solemnly handed over his list. Now he would only need to wait and occasionally take the greenhorn under his wing. But wouldn't it be wise to have a plan B up his sleeve? And devil's coincidence sent 2 old men right around the corner who bought 3 pumpkins for their grandchildren. One of them looked very cunning, and Jack had a bit of respect for him, but the second one seemed a little lost, and thus he made his perfect choice. Today, the 2nd of November, 1933, Holmes and I knocked in vain at Jack and Elsie Field's front door. "There seems to be nobody home, or perhaps we're too late," I lamented. "Holmes, step aside. I shall try to break down the door." But Holmes did not step aside. Instead, he simply turned the doorknob. "It's open," he said with superiority. We entered. Inside, a gloomy atmosphere prevailed. The curtains were drawn, and a strange smell of smoke filled our nostrils. I looked around and could make out a faint candlelight flickering from the adjoining room. "Holmes, in here," I showed my friend my discovery. "Be careful, Watson. Give your obituary the chance to remain unheard for a while longer." "Perhaps it would be better if you went first," I said, quickly pushing aside my budding overconfidence. When we entered the room, we both froze. Jack Field was lying on the floor, but he wasn't dead. No, he was alive and looking at us with alert eyes. "Mister, are you quite all right?" Holmes asked with concern, which in my opinion seemed rather excessive, given that the little fellow before us was responsible for 4 murders. "Don't come any closer," Jack Field screamed. Only then did I notice the solitary pumpkin which had found its position above his head. It glowed brightly and cast a wildly distorted grimace as a shadow upon the wall. Suddenly I heard that seductive voice again. It was Mary's voice. "Johnny, how lovely that you're here. Do you see the man lying before you? He alone is the reason why we cannot be together yet. But look closely. He is sacrificing himself. Quick, end it. Stab him." And suddenly I held a knife in my trembling hand, one with an ornately decorated pommel. I did not know what was happening to me, and this trance began to lay over me again, practically swallowing me whole. Hesitantly, I stepped towards Jack Field lying on the floor. I felt a firm grip around my upper arm holding me back. "Watson, no, do not do it!" But I did not react to Holmes's calls. I wanted to, but I could not. Yet lightning fast, without hesitating for even a second, Holmes leapt at me, wrested the knife from me, spun around, and thrust it into the heart of the figure with Mary's voice. Instantly, the trance state fell away from me, and I stared at the figure, which I believed to be the devil himself. But then his face changed one final time. It was Jack Oldfield. His shocked gaze remained fixed upon his own knife in his chest. "How can you kill me?" Jack Oldfield spoke in a choked voice. "You are here in our world, drunk Jack. In our world one can die, and I am sending you exactly where you belong, to the in-between world for all eternity." Jack Oldfield's figure slowly collapsed before completely dissolving into thin air. The second Jack on the ground had meanwhile lost consciousness and was now slowly coming round. We shall hand him over to Inspector Wolfford. Whether Holmes would tell him the truth or serve him some tale, I could not say at this point in time. The shock ran deep in my bones, and I could barely keep myself standing. "Watson, look there," Holmes urged me, and pointed to the last pumpkin. Slowly, the light began to flicker, and the flame grew smaller and smaller, as if someone were depriving it of the oxygen it needed, until it finally extinguished completely. "Jack has arrived at his eternal damnation," Holmes explained. "Well, those who deal with the devil—" "Or with you," I interrupted my friend with a relieved grin. You were listening to Charles Fraser, The Secret of Jack-O'-Lantern, The Sherlock Holmes Halloween Special. Episode 5. Based on the characters by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. A Go Audio production